Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mastery in Motion, the 2026 Virtual Summit of the Academy for Surgical Coaching. Mastery in Motion is more than a theme. It reflects a core belief of the Academy that surgical coaching is not a destination or a credential earned once. It is a continual practice, shaped each day in the operating room, refined through reflection after difficult cases, and strengthened in the moments when we choose curiosity, feedback, and growth over the assumption that we already have all the answers. Today's summit has 4 goals. We want to bring you the latest science on surgical performance and cognitive load so that our coaching conversations are grounded in evidence. We will explore how AI and emerging technology can extend the reach of human coaching without replacing the relationship at the heart of it. We'll challenge the way surgeons receive feedback and offer better frameworks for how we teach and how we learn. And we want to strengthen this community. Here's how the summit is structured. We will begin with a keynote from Dr. Carla Pugh, followed by a conversation between Dr. Pugh and Dr. Cara King, the president of the Academy for Surgical Coaching. Cara will then moderate our first panel on AI, data, and human intelligence in coaching. Lastly, we will close with a panel led by our surgical director, Dr. Christine Lombardozzi, on the feedback revolution and the modernization of how surgeons teach and learn. At the end of the 90 minutes, we hope you will leave with new frameworks, new questions, and a few moments that make you see your work differently. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to recognize the partners who made today's summit possible. To Vitvio, your commitment to bringing real data and insight into the operating room is exactly the kind of innovation that makes surgical coaching more powerful and more precise. Thank you. To theater, the AI-driven surgical intelligence you bring to clinical practice is nothing short of transformative. And your belief in coaching and the performance improvement aligns so deeply with what we do here. We are grateful to you. And to Caveris, your support of programs that invest in surgeon development and patient safety reflects a shared conviction that when surgeons grow, patients benefit. Thank you. Please join me in acknowledging these 3 remarkable organizations. Everything you will experience today is a reflection of their generosity. I'd like to share a few quick updates from the Academy because this past year has been a remarkable one for us. We now have more than 400 trained surgical coaches practicing in the United States and globally. 400. That number represents a community of surgeons who have made a decision to change how they grow and how they support one another. This year also marked the launch of the AGES Surgical Coaching Program, our first fully international initiative in partnership with the Australasian Gynecological Endoscopy and Surgical Society. This fully certified inaugural cohort is bringing evidence-based coaching to their colleagues across Australia and New Zealand. It is pioneering work, and we are thrilled with the international growth of the Academy. We also received Performance and Quality Improvement CME designation through the American College of Surgeons for our surgical coaching program. This is a meaningful recognition that what we do here is structured, evidence-based, and tied to measurable outcomes. And finally, we launched the Expert Insight series, our Mastery in Motion podcast, with 3 episodes now available on Spotify and YouTube. New episodes are uploaded on the 1st of the month and can also be accessed via our homepage. And now it's my honor to introduce the person who will set the tone for everything that follows today. Dr. Carla Pugh is a Thomas Krummel Professor of Surgery at Stanford University and the Director of the Technology-Enabled Clinical Improvement Center. The partnership between Dr. Pugh, the T.E.C.I Center, and the Academy for Surgical Coaching is one that we hold in the highest regard. Her work and ours share the same foundational belief that surgical performance can be made visible, measurable, and improvable, and that technology, when used thoughtfully, can accelerate every surgeon's growth. Dr. Pugh's research goal is to forge a new path towards applied quality metrics in healthcare, and to change the face of medical and surgical education through data analytics, data visualization, and performance feedback. She uses sensors and advanced engineering technologies to develop new approaches for assessing and defining mastery in clinical procedural skills. She holds multiple patents on sensor and data acquisition technology to measure and characterize hands-on clinical skills. Today, more than 200 medical and nursing schools are using her sensor-enabled training tools. That is the scale of her reach and her impact. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Pugh as a partner, a collaborator, and our keynote speaker today. Carla?
Thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. As soon as I started sharing, all of these other screens popped up. I'm fixing it. So thank you so much again for the opportunity. I look forward to my interview with Dr. Cara King. I know there is lots to talk about here, and we've been in some very exciting places together with key decision makers in surgery, which that just fuels, the energy and opportunity here. So thank you all for joining, and I will get right to it. So what if we had access to continuous data streams from the operating room? And I'm not just talking video. Could we use the data for formative assessment and enable individualized precision learning and feedback? This is the future. This is what we're striving for. This is what we're working on with our collaborators. Many of you know the work that I've done in the simulation, and we're also translating this to the operating room. And that's what's exciting, is that the exact same sensors can be used across multiple platforms, whether you're in a simulated environment, whether you're in an open surgery, laparoscopic, or robotic. And this allows the opportunity to capture someone in their full clinical range. Most persons work in more than one domain, laparoscopic and open or laparoscopic and robotic, or all across three. And I think that will continue. The other interesting thing is across multiple robotic platforms. There are new robots getting FDA approval and folks using them internationally and now in the US. And so how do you go from one platform to another? And we're able to capture and gain insight on that information. One of the things that's been really exciting is just this, that, verbal and audio data as a biomarker of performance. We've done a study and have repeated it in other venues outside of the traditional academic publication framework, that how someone speaks during an unexpected event determines how quickly they will address that event. And it's not complex. We did this before ambient listening, and this was in 2020, and it's really basic language and a discourse analysis, and it was similar to a machine learning algorithm. And now that capability is here. And I think not only the cadence of which you speak, their tone of voice, all of those things can help you understand the interpersonal communication of your team members and you as a leader, and your cognitive ability to address the unexpected finding or event. Video is something we've all been familiar with, and I think that working with a number of the different companies that are using AI to analyze surgical videos to gain insights, the first major thing was segmenting a video and looking at the amount of time you spend on each technique. And it was just interesting. This is one of the papers we published on. We really challenged one of the companies and said, we think that your AI algorithms are going to become less accurate when the disease severity increases. So we did a human AI comparison with the surgeons at Stanford that do gallbladder surgery, and they had a huge database of cholecystectomies, and our surgeons looked and documented whether they believed in this particular operation, the critical view of safety was achieved or not. And then we did the comparison. So Parkland 1, disease severity, sort of really more for biliary colic, not much inflammation. And then the horrific gallbladder with thickened rind and you're spilling bile and losing gallstones. And so that's sort of the range. It turned out, we were wrong. Turns out that when the gallbladder is difficult, the surgeons tend to skeletonize the anatomy and it looks like this. Also turns out that the early sort of annotation of the critical view of safety, people were expecting to see this. When the anatomy looked this way, AI said you did not achieve the critical view of safety. The surgeons said you did. And that little piece of fat and, your hepatocystic triangle isn't as big. This was the difference. And so it just goes to show how you train your algorithms, what you're looking at, and how much data you have to see the wide variety of anatomy. The other thing we learned, and I'll just go through this, is that with segmentation and this technology, we could actually look at 50 videos in an hour. Why? Because we weren't looking at the entire video. We were looking at that moment just before you clipped. What was your anatomy? And it was the most powerful learning experience. In that moment, you realize that, yes, the critical view of safety and achieving it is a guideline and it helps. But at least 30% of the time, you are not able to achieve the critical view of safety because of an anomaly or different path of an artery or the shortened duct. And so that is when surgeons are off the beaten path because you actually can't achieve the critical view of safety because of the anatomy. So how do you decide? And sitting there watching those decisions real time is like watching a football game and you're like in the end zone, you're right there, like over and over again. And it was really exciting to see the decisions they made when they got into bleeding and why did it happen. And I think this is one benefit, if you will, of AI within surgical video. But the decision making, the cognitive, and it makes us thoughtful that when companies talk about decision support for surgeons, there's more to it than a general decision. It's the entire workflow. Who's your team? Who's your instrument? What's your cognitive load at that time when your circulator or scrub nurse tells you that your favorite instrument isn't available and the anatomy is bad? Like those are the kind of things that line up sometimes that need to be addressed with cognitive load that we're not capturing. I cannot look at this video and tell you what your cognitive load is. There's no AI algorithm that can do that either. Hence, we have started using EEG sensors in the OR and have been doing it for several years now. This is me with one of the EEGs from a company. There are a variety of others. This is my brain during an appendectomy. This is my brain during a cholecystectomy. And there are some common things that you see. The darker, deeper red is higher levels of focus and cognitive load. It turns out there is something called visual loading. Most times surgeons are multitasking, so there's a lot going on, but visual loading is very special. And just getting in here, you see the gallbladder, you focus on it, now you know what you have to deal with. Then you start to do some dissection, you find the artery, you dissect the duct. Then you're ligating, and that's a point of no return. Similar here, finding the appendix, dissecting, getting your mesentery, then you're firing your stapler. These two spaces here in between the dark and then it gets lighter, this is when you're bagging the organ. This is hemostasis. A little more to focus on in the liver than it is with the appendix, but this is time series data, synchronized, and again, you can't get this information from AI just looking at a video. This is an example of real-time EEG data in a simulation. And what you see here is a surgical resident and an assistant that's holding the camera for them as they prep a mesh to put over. This is the laparoscopic view from the endoscope. And this is a Swiss cheese hernia in the midline. And what you will see, this amplitude and this pattern you see, this is when there is high focus, high cognitive load. This is multitasking. This person is suturing, they're planning, they're giving instructions, they're judging whether the person is doing what they're wanting to do, they're correcting them, and they're also trying not to stick them with the needle at the same time. Once the mesh is fully prepped and goes in the abdomen, you'll see it appear, the brain waves change immediately. And then they start to rise again. But this change is that you're now no longer communicating and multitasking with and you're with your team member, and you're not suturing or doing any motor control. But eventually the motor loading increases because you're now unraveling the suture nest here to get your transfascial sutures. So you will see this. Lots of communication, lots of coordinating, directing. And here comes the mesh in the abdomen and the brainwaves drop. What is interesting about this is that you can ask a surgeon what were the critical points. Some of them are so automated, they don't think to tell you, but they still happen. Just because the surgeon doesn't verbalize it when you're trying to do a think aloud, that doesn't mean that their brain's not processing what they're seeing. And that's what you're seeing right now is the brain processing and the biomarker of the human brain of a surgeon. Motion has value in skills assessment. I think we all know that, just wanting to sort of close the loop on all the sensors. Turns out it's not only when you're moving, but when you're not moving, that gives really important information. Many of these assessments that we do with the technology, we can give you feedback on your learning needs within 5 minutes for residents and within 10 minutes for skilled surgeons. So this is just one pathway to continuous data streams in the operating room. And I think there are numerous opportunities for formative assessment and precision learning. Obviously, the fear is for summative assessment, which would be a disaster. And that's been the exciting thing to work with the American Board of Medical Specialties, which is the umbrella organization for all of the specialty boards. And we are working with them through a grant from the AMA to talk about how do we take this data and turn it into something that's of value where you can get continuing professional development credits. This is an example of one of the studies we did where we did use the EEG sensors on surgeons here with an assistant, and the coach is observing and completing a standardized assessment form. So all of this technology does not get rid of the judgment of a skilled surgeon and a coach. And so this is an example of that. And I will end here. I know I'm a little over time, but getting to the goal that we want to get to requires trusted organizations. And these are the ones that can drive measurement culture and help us to make this data sort of the mainstay in everyday use in surgery. Thank you.
Love that. Carl, every time I listen to you, my mind explodes with ideas of where to bring all of this. Thank you so much for your work in these areas. It's so critical to actually push the needle forward with all the things that you're mentioning. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, are you ready to chat it up?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So I want to start in this area of PICME, Performance Improvement CME, which the Academy for Surgical Coaching was one of the first institutions or quality metrics that have qualified for that PICME. So just a level set, this performance improvement CME is measurement. It requires some type of measurement or assessment. It requires an intervention, and then it requires a remeasurement again. And so with all of your work in this precision teaching, precision assessment, talk me through your vision of how all of this work in getting more intraoperative data can really integrate within this new PICME that's going to be rolling out in the future.
There's two pathways. There's two parts, two things that need to happen. One, we continue our collaboration with the specialty boards, right? Because they are the decision makers in terms of who get credit. Obviously, working with the ACCME, making sure that we meet their requirements. The other part in reality is working with industry.
Yeah.
They have data. Um, getting them to partner with us with respect to how do you vet their data. If the boards say this is minimum competency, this is what they're going to use to give you feedback, but it's proprietary information.
Right.
So how do you then have that proprietary cutoff, give people feedback, but they actually can't give that cutoff information to industry groups. So that is the pathway. Those are the things that need to happen, but how we do it will be interesting. It's easy for me to say I'm not a CEO of a big company, but the bigger part of industry wants to play. They need to give up their data. They need to give up a data set and partner with us such that then we say across all of these metrics, this is what we deem competent, but you cannot know the proprietary metrics in the background. So that's the way that it has to happen. The beauty of it, if you think about it, and I'll end here because I know you have lots of questions, those industry groups that partner with the board will have another selling point for their technology because the thought of a surgeon getting continuing professional development credit while they are doing their job,
Exactly.
that is the perfect fit in the surgeon workflow. Obviously, there's a step after. You have to agree to participate, then get the feedback, and then do something about it. So you still have one more step, but this is very different than a NISQIP, where you're participating, you don't really have to do anything, there's no review. Um, Very different than having to fly to a course, then take that course, then get CME credit. I think the goal here with the new ABMS standards that the boards are going after is how do we make it easy for the surgeons, but highly impactful?
Yep.
And the answer is build it into the workflow.
And I think you're nailing it in this partnership of AI in general, these different tech industry platforms and surgeons. Like it requires all of us to be integrated, right?
Yes.
And I hear a lot of people thinking AI is going to take over or the humans aren't part of it, but AI, these platforms are to make us better versions of ourselves, right? Like I'm going back to your cognitive bandwidth that you mentioned, like the visual loading. I love seeing it all stripped out, right? With your appies and your choles and the parts that are irreversible. Like that's when I get hot and I ask for them to cool the room down, right? I keep thinking
And you
about
turn
that.
the music down, right? The whole everything because it's not looking right. Can you turn my usual music down? Yeah, it is
Right.
because you're
Yeah.
taking in all that information, the heart rate, the anesthesia machine,
Yeah.
the music, people coming in, interrupting, and then there's that moment, and we're like, okay, look, can you pause for a second so I can make this
Yes.
critical decision? Yeah,
Like all of a
it
sudden you
happens.
realize your bandwidth all of a sudden is maxed out and like all of a sudden every little thing is like accentuated in your brain, right? And
Yes.
so I love this space that you're trying to like measure that immeasurable thing, like that like just stuff that you have when you know things are elevated but you can't put your finger on it. So I want to take that to the next level. So quality metrics. Like right now, we have a lot of quality metrics that tell us when things went wrong. We have complication outcomes, we have EBLs, we have bladder bowel injuries, but there's not a lot that can help us like in the moment, intraoperative cognitive process. So I'm curious, what would a quality metric look like if we could actually hang our hat on that intraoperative cognitive component instead of looking at all the downstream outcomes? Does that
It's
question
gonna
make
be,
sense?
I know exactly what you're saying, and it's fine. And my answer is gonna be different than what you may think. And we have this in some preliminary data, and once we saw it, we're like, wow, that's a whole nother layer. So the cognitive process, it's not just the surgeon's data. And that
Yeah.
is actually the biggest mistake of a lot of our quality work. Early on, we only focused on the patient and the patient risk factors. Then the next phase, we focused on the patient and their risk factors and the surgeon's technical skills. Wow, there's so much more that is going on. And we failed to look at the team.
Yeah.
So when you talk about real quality metrics and the cognitive process, you're putting sensors on everyone in the operating room, and we did it. And I can't show it because I haven't published it yet. It tells in a very precise manner the workflow of care.
Yeah.
When the patient hit the room, because we put the sensors on the team members before they come in before the patient comes in the room. Because once the patient's in the room, then nobody will let you play with them and, put Dawn and Doff and put all these sensors on them. So we get them out there before their scrub sink, we go to their office and they wear it
Yeah.
in the hallway. And so we know their brain in the hallway versus their brain in the scrub sink, then when they're operating. And literally, once it's usually the resident that's draping the patient, they have a blip because you're trying not to, it's just little things.
Right.
You're trying not to contaminate yourself, right? Then you do the timeout. Who has the highest cognitive load in the timeout? It's the circulator because they're leading it and they're like bossing you around and reading little papers. Soon as you enter the abdomen, everybody's brain waves go up, but at a different level. So those that have the most experience, their brainwaves are higher because they are then bringing in that working memory from all of the other things, okay, great. They're looking at that anatomy, like I showed you that peak, like, okay, great. I
Yeah.
see the gallbladder now, I know what I'm looking at. And you can't, I try to tell the medical students, don't follow the camera because I can't, you don't know what I'm looking at and I can't tell you. Like you wouldn't know where to point the camera. I'm looking at this whole field. But it's that thing that's really, really quick, that survey. The circulators, um, if they're paying attention, sometimes they're not. The scrub nurse, that's how you know if you got a good one.
Right.
Every major decision, their brainwave is tracking the brainwave of the surgeon when they're paying attention. Guess what? If they're not, that means they're not paying attention. Or part of the case, that means that they need more training in that specific part of the case so that they can be with you. So it's not just the surgeon's brain, it's the team. And people want it. The irony of it is when the surgeons were wearing it at Stanford and I was wearing, they're like, what about ours? Like the nurses were asking us because I was like, I'm not going to ask them. They're going to think we're spying and they're going to tell me no and the whole nine yards. They were like, no, we want to do this. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, yeah, we're trying to see, what are critical decision points and how we, improve our game. Like, the residents are on the learning curve to competency, the surgeons are on the learning curve to mastery. And we say that as one big word, but I'm talking at every step. And so you can have a master surgeon who's great, but there's always someone that's better than them at step number 7 or number 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you get into like the digital twin concept. The digital twin is mastery at every point merged together, and then we are getting feedback according to the best of all of us together in one system. Same thing like ChatGPT can write better than us or write those articles. It's doing it based off the research that we've already done and it's feeding it back to us.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So that's how we
Mind
do it.
exploding. Okay, that sounds easy. That's amazing. So let me think this through though, right? Because we think like cognitive bandwidth, like we don't want to be maxed up, but there's times when our cognitive bandwidth should be peaking, is what I'm hearing, right? And so if you have a learner with you who's not peaking when they should be peaking, like that's equally a problem that they don't realize that that should be peaking, right?
Exactly. It is. And I can't say a lot more until like, I have a paper that is just mapped out and it's some of the things we found were unexpected, but
Yeah.
made sense when you think about the literature, the cognitive science literature where they do experimental exercises that cause increase in cognitive load. And they never reach the same level of real work environment because the real work environment is more noisy. There's more things happening, it's more dynamic. And so there's differences in the experimental mode versus real world. And there's not as many real world studies. And we were able to do it with getting all the surgeons at Stanford to wear EEGs and then having the nurses do it as well. Um, it's a game changer in terms of so many things, in terms of teamwork, which is so important, and an ability to have an objective measure that can help you be the A team.
I'm hearing like again the different performance boxes where technical is just one component
It's so
of the
small.
entire picture, right? And
It's
I
so
think
small,
it's so small.
but we still manage it because I
Yes.
mean, the experienced surgeons move slower than the fellows when it matters. and they
Yep.
nail that stitch on the first time. The fellows, we were trying, remember when we asked the fellows, like, wait, what are you doing here? You're all like, and they're like, because we don't want you to take over. But they're
Yep.
making a mistake and then they have to redo the stitch and all this, but they're still moving fast. So they look like they're busy, so that we don't, as the attendings don't take over and take the case from them.
But in
But
our minds, we're like, do the fast things fast and the slow things slow, right? Like, know
it's
what those are.
right. They're not there yet. And they accept inferior circumstances, so they make more mistakes. For us, we see that mistake, it peaks on the brainwave, and then you know, fix it or change something and then go on with your business. But
Yeah.
sometimes they just go with the flow.
But I'll say from the Academy side, Carla, we can't thank you enough for pulling us in early because all of your data metrics are so incredibly important and partnered with a two-way conversation around them, like those the pictures you showed from the ACS a few years ago, sitting down with those data metrics, having a two-way conversation, like that's when things explode. So thank you for pulling us in so early into your magical mind.
Well, thanks for playing. Like you didn't know what you were getting into, and it kind of worked out. I mean, every day I'm still excited by the fact that it changed the workflow of the coaching, where you all are
Yes.
working hard to build rapport, to give this surgeon and convince them that you actually have something to say, like, and they're all judging you like, yeah, I'm probably better than you. What are you going to do in coaching or whatever? Like, that's the mode, but I'm still here because maybe I'll learn something. And then when they
Yeah.
get this data, they come back and they're like, "Oh wow, yeah, I was thinking this here," and then they just don't even introduce themselves. They start talking to you, and then now
Yep.
you're coaching, and they don't even. That's the way it's supposed to be. But that is exactly what the American Board of Medical Specialties is looking for when they talk about progressive participation in quality at the individual level.
Yep.
So I'm excited of where we're going to go with this.
We're just changing surgery completely. Minor thing. Awesome.
I don't know. It's not that easy. Surgeons don't have any opinions or anything.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you. Thank
So,
you, Carla, for your time. We appreciate you so much. I know you're running around the
yeah.
world, so thank you for
All right.
spending your evening afternoon with us.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Nice to meet everyone.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh, for sharing your expertise and for that enlightening conversation. One of the themes that you just heard one of the themes that we heard is that the data is only as useful as what we do with it. And our first panel, moderated by Dr. Cara King, will elaborate on this theme. Dr. King is the section head of minimally invasive gynecologic surgery and medical gynecology at Cleveland Clinic. She's also the program director for the fellowship in MIGS and director of innovation at the Women's Health Institute. In addition to these roles, Dr. King serves as president of the Academy for Surgical Coaching, bringing her considerable expertise to the advancement of coaching methodologies. Our panelists for Making Data Actionable, the AI and Human Intelligence Partnership, are Thomas Fox, the founder and CEO of Vitvio, whose technology integrates computer vision, ambient sensing, and AI into operating rooms to track and analyze surgical procedures in real time. Dr. Tamir Wolf, CEO and co-founder of Theater, a physician turned entrepreneur who is using AI and computer vision to analyze operative video at a scale we have never seen before, with the mission of reducing variability in surgical outcomes around the world. And Dr. Dan Donahoe, an assistant professor of neurosurgery and pediatrics at Children's National Hospital and George Washington University, whose NIH-funded research builds AI systems specifically designed to improve surgical safety, and who is also the founder and president of the Surgical Data Science Collective. Cara, please take it away.
All right. Hi, you guys. How are you? Tamir.
Hello.
Hello, boys. Okay.
We're
Thomas, I
great,
saw
if only for the fact that you didn't ask us for slides for this.
Yes.
We're like, amazing.
You have no idea how much that made my day to get that email.
you're so welcome. Dan at 1 a.m. He's like, so did you want a slide? No, we're good. We're good. All right. Thank you all for joining us. You guys are all over the world. We really appreciate it. Thomas, I saw your eyes like lighting up when Carla's like, yeah, technical is just a small part of this. We need the room dynamics. Thomas is like, preach, right? I
I
know.
was actually sending Carla a message on the side saying we should talk because we found a lot of similar insights by just looking at the movement of the people in the room. You can tell like when the stressful times are and so on. Yeah.
God, like my
Yeah,
mind
it's interesting.
explodes with like everything just overlaying, right? To get the full picture and
Hmm.
how, like, again, the AI and human intelligence synergize together. I mean, this is an incredible time to be part of medicine, surgery in general, right? Okay, let's go. So, with all this being said, we're generating so much data now, intraoperative data. We have probably for a while, but we're actually utilizing it now in really cool ways. So, intracorporeal, extracorporeal, surgical instrument motion data. But surgical outcomes have largely plateaued, right? We're looking at all these downstream outcomes. So, I want to talk to you guys about that. What's the disconnect between the data that we're generating now and a plateau in the actual outcomes from a surgical perspective? Who wants to start? Thomas, give it to me. What are your initial thoughts?
I I think I maybe have a very controversial answer here. Is
Love
that
that.
I think it's about where hospitals are spending most of their efforts and thought processes these days. So for a really long time, we spent a lot of efforts on trying to improve the safety of surgery and outcomes of patients and so on. But now hospitals are starting to face a very what I almost call like an existential survivability crisis coming up because we've got the aging populations, rising costs, lack of medical staff, and so on, which has shifted a lot of the focus towards how do we be more efficient and how do we make sure that we're getting to these patients because the most unsafe surgery that can exist is the surgery that doesn't happen. Which is
Mm-hmm.
ends up meaning that a lot of this focus gets shifted away from that, where then you start to see like innovations start to stall. Now, it's also that we went through a really strong like innovation period where you can make large leaps in technology quite easily. That now you're starting to see that plateau a little bit because we need to have a next technical revolution with things like what Tamir and the team are working on, and as well the other panelists here as well. It's just that we're basically kind of in this period of like it's a bit of a lull before I think we're going to start to jump again. But that's
Yeah.
also, it kind of makes sense because it's where the hospitals are starting to put a lot of investment into is not necessarily all focused around that safety aspect as it used to be.
It's interesting you say that. I think a lot about these quality metrics that are being pushed on us, expressed to us. I don't know if the
Yeah.
right word is to surgeons, and who's actually creating those quality metrics, right? Is it the surgeons? Oftentimes not, right? It's like the outside people telling us that we need to get this checklist better or like efficiency stuff. It doesn't feel as meaningful to us as surgeons. Do you see that when you're out and about in the world?
I've actually seen like a almost a let's say a slightly different perspective. I do agree that those metrics get pushed like down, like pushed from some ether towards
Yeah.
the surgical teams. But I also do see that when I talk to the surgeons, they're the ones that are the most focused on patient outcomes and
Yeah.
the safety of the surgery and how do we get better with every procedure that we're doing. But I do also see that it's often can fall on deaf ears as to getting more investment to go in that direction further because even if those things are being pushed from the ether, when you push back to try to get some capital associated to it, it can be a difficult conversation in the opposite direction. So I actually do see
Yeah.
that like the surgical teams are pushing really hard to try to improve this, but I think that until the hospitals running as like a stable financial entity get out of that existential crisis, it's a bit hard for them to dedicate more resources or
Yeah.
capital to that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it's a weird situation to be in across the front. And now you'll notice that like, if you go to any of these conferences these days, like everything is talking about surgical efficiency and throughput and so on. It's just like it's a theme that like tends to be across the board. So I think that we kind of have to solve something that's been lagging behind for a while, which is that surgical efficiency aspect to get hospitals be more capital efficient, and then we'll start
Yeah.
to see more capital coming back into the safety aspects. I will also add one piece just because I like to harp on this and maybe it'll get me in trouble one day is is that I also think the FDA becomes a graveyard for startups, and it becomes really difficult to get through some of these processes and get VC money and external funding to dedicate to something that you have to go through device
Yeah.
classifications. You know what I mean? So that also like fear like makes companies, like if there's not a lot of capital going into it, it makes it harder to start a company within that space.
You nailed it, which is why I'm so thankful for you people to dedicate your energy to us, because we tend to lag behind because it's so hard. So you nailed it. Tamir, I want to shift to you for a moment. So intracorporeal data. Yeah. So theater is looking at through a scope, through a robot, through a cystoscope, through a hysteroscope. Talk to me about what you're seeing with the data that's now being given to surgeons. What kind of insights are surgeons having about their own practices that didn't maybe realize before? Like, what things have you seen that has surprised the surgeons when you actually give them the data?
So I'll answer that. I want to add just one thing to what Thomas said in like the controversial type of approach. Like healthcare systems, I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, like the focus on efficiency and on like greater throughput. Okay, so you're starting to like push more patients through the operating room. Okay, but like how do you perform? Like, when the end goes up, like do we still keep the same quality? And I think that's where like we need the combination of both, technological capabilities that help us like with greater efficiency and like move patients like quicker, faster, more efficiently through the operating room, and then like the impact on how we actually provide care. So I think that's where, a combination of the extracorporeal elements, the intracorporeal elements, that's where it all comes to play. I think to your point, there are several things I think that Carla, and you talked about. I think the first thing is that the best surgeons are not necessarily the fastest ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of what we're seeing from the data is about consistency. It's about being methodological. It's about identifying those key elements that you need to get to in order to proceed safely with procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once you're like high up the totem pole, it's like very easy, and sometimes you don't even perceive these things that you're doing. But I think that's one of the things that we see that like that's really really important. I think another aspect that's like potentially a blind spot is like understanding where the outcome is really determined. So you go through a procedure, and like what as a surgeon do you remember? You remember the hard moment. You remember like the dissection,
Mm-hmm.
like near critical structure, like the near miss, the like the difficult plane. That's what you remember. But usually like everything that you did before that, setting up to like those minutes until that moment that you recall, I think, really, really important to understand those moments. And I think everything that we're doing with the visuals and analysis and having like the intracorporeal video as something that you can review when you're calm, and I think is really, really important from that perspective. And I think the maybe a third aspect is variability, and that's not driven
Mm-hmm.
by the patient. So like the same procedure, but like sometimes we see things that are done completely differently. Different steps, duration, like the different approach. And I think that by being able to demonstrate and show that type of variability, we're able to help like standardize things even for a surgeon. And this applies usually like in the early phases, as surgeons are figuring out, what the best way to a specific patient population is, like based on their own
Mm-hmm.
capabilities. So these are some of the things that we see with our partners.
I love this. And I heard you say the fastest surgeon is not always the best surgeon. And I think that, I mean, speed has been a surrogate for expertise for so long because we haven't had the lens to actually understand what's going on, right? And so I love that we're flipping the script, that fast does not necessarily mean better. And what does that look like? So love that. The
The
other big
Navy
question,
SEAls had it right for a long time, Slow, what is
right?
it? Fast is slow,
Slow
slow
is
is fast.
fast. Hmm. Yep.
Mir's like, yes, exactly right. Truth. And I think the other trigger, not trigger, but like word that gets me like wicked excited is performance. Because like what is performance? And this I've spent so much time in this space recently just trying to understand what is performance. And we talk about the different areas within surgical coaching of technical, cognitive, self-regulation, communication, like all of that equals performance. And how do you actually integrate all of that when you are, I say reviewing video with a coach, yeah, like two-way conversation around that and breaking into all those spaces. So love that. One last question for you, Timur, before we move to you, Dan. You talk about variability, right, and understanding variability that matters versus variability that maybe doesn't matter. Like not all variability is necessarily bad, right? So what do you think about that area of standardization of procedures and understanding what variability between procedure A and B actually makes a difference in outcomes? How do you think about that?
It's a good question. So, of course it is, Cara.
I'm sorry. What are you?
So, yeah, so my take is like, of course, we need to understand techniques and approaches, but I don't think we need to normalize to technique. I think that's the wrong goal. I think it's wrong for the surgeon. It's also wrong for patients in my mind. I think variability is not necessarily the problem. I think the variability in technique is not necessarily the problem. Variability in outcome is, and I think that's what we need to think about, because like we're seeing, in like thousands of procedures across like hospitals and across geographic locations, that diversity is actually how the field improves. And I think we have the capability today for the first time to link intraoperative performance to outcomes. And so, okay, how do we minimize that variability in outcomes? And I think the way we do that is by really normalizing not against technique, but against like the anchors that really matter for safety. So in lap cholecystectomy, it's critical view of safety. Hysterectomies, taking deliberate look at the ureter. Colectomy, integrity of anastomosis, etc. So I think these are the things that we should ideally, in my mind, normalize to. Not necessarily the specific technique. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to do, I think all of us collectively here, is really like de-silo
Yeah.
this world of surgery, and like unearth and understand what like different folks are doing at different stages of their professional capabilities, with different patient population. Um, and I think variability is inherent, and I think it's also like in the technique. And if we're able to really understand like the differences in technique and then take a look at like how those impact outcomes, I think that's where the magic really happens.
Great answer, Tamir. I love your brain. That's
Thank you.
fantastic. Yeah, because I think, and also like understanding what's going on extracorporeally during the intracorporeal parts of the variability, like all that is just, you can't separate any of that. That's all the true full picture story. So that's why both of you guys are a perfect fit for this. All right, Dan, you're up, baby. You ready?
Let's
Hi.
do it.
Hi. So you've done incredible work in this space of assessment and like movement of instruments, working volume, and really deliberate assessment on different surgeons and different procedures. I saw your work in person a couple of weeks ago when I was in Philadelphia, and I was fully impressed. You guys are doing really incredible things. Talk me through, how do you share assessment metrics, assessment scores, insights regarding technical skill with surgeons in a way that doesn't feel punitive, but it actually feels like insight and growth? Like, how do you marry those two?
Yeah, I think what you're getting to is something that's really important, which is that data in and of itself has almost no value whatsoever, and that insight is data that motivates action in a particular context. And hopefully that's in coaching, of course. That's why we're all here. When we can't all have the expert human coach available, we start to wonder, well, how can we supplement that? And I think that's where there are some interesting things that we'll show a little bit later in the year. We have a trial going on right now, so I don't want to speak about the results before it's done. But we're very excited to see how we can, in different contexts, whether it's learner by themselves, learner plus coach, or even just a coach, inform that improvement in surgical performance using data. I think the other thing that we're really excited about it, interested, and again, still early for this, is how do we scale this across procedures, across patients, across contexts? Because it's one thing to nail one particular procedure type in one particular disease state, and then you have to go back and reinvent the wheel in every single new procedure and disease state. And then, oh, whoops, you're in a different country, right? We have folks from 61 different countries who use our stuff. Like, that's a big deal. When you operate in Addis Ababa, or you operate in Dar es Salaam, or you operate in Washington, D.C., right? Just 3 places that I've done in the last year. Like, those are all completely different in contexts. with different needs, even if they're doing the exact same procedure with the same instruments on quote, quote, the same patient for the same quote, quote, risk adjusted, situation. And I think that starting to get a handle on that again, very early days, that's really an interesting spot. I think to some of the stuff that Carla is working on that's really interesting for me is maybe, less so in the procedural, read your brain kind of moment. I guess as somebody who, puts EEGs in the brain on a daily basis, it's I have some thoughts. But what I'm really interested in is what does this reflect in how we can improve your performance? Right. In the moment, I think it's an interesting question, but I think actually there's fairly robust data about how we can target feedback to optimal moments and optimal sort of emotional states that will encode memory more effectively. Like that is very, very sort of tried and true literature. And that would be extremely interesting. Like, what is the feedback X the surgeon state interaction that is going to actually encode for better performance on the next go round? Super fascinating stuff.
Oh, I like this a lot. So I'm thinking about, so I have my master's in med ed. So I don't know deep, like in-depth knowledge necessarily about the critical space of where the cognitive load needs to be for a learner to take in the most, right? Like if you give feedback that's too hard, they're going to shut down. If it's too easy, it's not helpful. You have to find that space that's like perfectly hard, right? Is that kind of what you're referencing in regard to cognitive load and giving the feedback or the coaching?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of domains. I mean, I think emotional arousal plays a big domain. I think how salient the information is to what you're ready to handle. I think there are a lot of interesting domains to this, and I think that one of the things that we've also seen is how do you get a learner to want to go out and acquire that information? Like you're saying, there has to be a lot of psychological safety, right? If we're gonna, so we've showed some things to surgeons, as I'm sure everyone has thought of like, well, what if we put up a leaderboard, right? That is everyone who does X type of surgery, anonymized, right? Okay, of course, right? And said, hey, you're, the number 72nd best, we'll use our most favorite procedure of all time, lap chole, right? The 72nd best lap chole on this metric, right? Of all surgeons on earth. Like, how many surgeons are going to be like, rah, rah, let me go get that again, right? There's 10,000 surgeons. I'm number 72. And how many surgeons are going to say, oh, I don't know if I like that so much. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of interest, right? Now, on the other hand, if you can flip that and you could say, hey, here's someone, I'm not going to tell you, again, talk about somewhat of informative, right? But like, here's someone who's one step ahead of you in the rankings on this particular task, and here's how they do it, right? Is that now something that some learner might be ready for? So I think it's figuring out all of these things of how to package this information to optimize the enjoyment of accessing information and ultimately the outcome for the patient. I think that's something we think a lot about is how do you, I think like all the three of us is how do you optimize for the patient outcome? I think optimizing for the surgeon functionality is a critical piece of that, but there's a lot there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And not only like this is how the surgeon with a higher ranking does it, but actually two-way conversation around where they are, their ideal state, and how to close that gap in a meaningful, deliberate way, right? So I feel you. Okay, Thomas, I'm going back to you. I'm thinking about culture. Tamir and I talk about this a lot, and that like the technical part of this, the technological part of this is one thing, but the cultural implementation is like everything, right? So going into an operating room, all of a sudden having cameras and things become more transparent, it takes a psychologically safe space and
100%.
a top-down, bottom-up type of rollout. Talk me through, now that you're in many, many different institutions, what are the top things that you have seen in institutions that have rolled out extracorporeal cameras in a way that's thrived? Like what do they do differently in the cultural aspect to make them thrive?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things, and actually, I want to come back to one piece. Is we talk a lot about the surgeon and trying to how do we improve patient outcomes, but we've actually seen that in a lot of cases, how to improve the patient outcomes is ironically not to focus on the surgeon, but to focus on everybody else in the room and how to reduce cognitive load, because people who have fewer things to do and can focus on just their key their key role and focus on that patient completely, as well as everybody around them, is fewer things to do. There's less stress in the entire environment. All of a sudden, they start to perform better by default. Now, the other thing is that we did notice that, like with top organizations, these are like the Formula One teams. You know what I mean? These guys, they want to know. They're like driven to do it. But the reality is that we don't want to build systems just for these Formula One or these top tier, players in the market, and that we've had to really focus on how do we make this something that every surgeon can get value out of. And it kind of goes to Daniel's point as well, is like, those Formula One, those like top tier places, the top surgeons in the world, they put them on a leaderboard, that'll encourage them, right? But then you go to, a rural hospital, or you go to or to just an ASC or something like this. It simply just doesn't impact them as much. They're very actually, they're a lot more cautious about it. They're more worried about being punished for the results, rather than it being a coachable moment. So we've really focused on, first off, reduce cognitive load, let them focus more on the surgical tasks and take over as much of the administrative work, orchestration work, all this stuff that goes around the surgery that is not necessarily the doing the surgery itself. And the second thing is, we've been really focused on building systems to essentially act as a self-reflecting mirror, rather than something that can be used for punishment. Because we really have to separate the improving results from something that you can be punished for. Of course, there's things that are inexcusable, but that's something that, that can be handled outside of a system. You probably don't want that to be built in by default. Maybe one day we'll get there. But today, if you want mass adoption of these things, you need to make it feel like, hey, this will not be used against you, but it is used for you by yourself to reflect on it and try to get you to a better state. And then try to encourage them to be using that more. Because it's like, when you talk to a system, or you're reviewing a system, and you can self-reflect, it makes it a lot easier for you to consume and take that feedback on, than it being like, oh my God, am I going to be fired, or am I going to is this going to be used against me? And we just see that there's a lot of hesitation if the surgeons feel, or anybody in the team feels, it's going to be that way. And the reality is, the surgeons less often can get punished for this, but you talk about nursing staff. I mean, there is a lot of pressure on nursing staff, and they is a really big concern for them. So we've had to be really upfront and transparent across the board when we get into these health systems, and say, we know that it can seem like a good idea to use this for individual performance metrics. Do not do that. It is an anti-pattern that will destroy your team culture. It will make everybody in that room not want to work in those kind of rooms. But if you want that to actually be to actually see improvement, not just have a metric that calculates that, then what you need to do is make this a safe environment that those people can actually self-reflect and take that information, and allow us to also look at that information without them being constantly in fear.
Brilliant. This is why you're thriving as the leader of your group, because you're nailing it. If you just make it a metric, if this is just like checklist manifesto, it's so superficial, right? It's so much.
But sometimes that's it's almost like a desire. We kind of do that as humans. We like to measure things and then put that measurement against this and see how we're trending.
Yeah.
And while I think that's an important thing, I think that you kind of have to anonymize it as much as you can, but then the individual stuff, let only that person, or that person and a trusted individual that they chose to give them this feedback, work with them on it, because otherwise it just becomes destructive, not constructive.
Yeah, yep, exactly right. And I think the non-punitive lens has to be throughout the entire organization, because it can be easy to turn to that. And you have to have a mechanism built in before you even launch these platforms to support your surgeons and your teams, right? Timur, have you seen
100%.
that? Yeah. When you're doing your intracorporeal data, you look at me and smile. So when you are launching your platforms to different institutions, you have to have a mechanism to support the quote unquote lower performers, and that they're not in trouble, but we're there to raise them up to be the best version of themselves. Yeah.
I mean, that's the idea. And that's the idea. It's, to level everyone up. I think institutional culture is key, and honestly, even as we engage partners, those are the partners that we really aim for. If we're going to health systems where we know that there's I think trust, it was said tangentially here several times, but I think trust is key. It's the trust between the individuals, the team, the surgical team, and everyone around them. It's the trust with the institution and with leadership, and it's that has to be there. And then obviously the trust in the folks in the company, but the trust institutionally has to be there. And if not, then it doesn't matter what technology you're going to try to bring to improve. Anytime you have a spotlight on something, absent that trust, it's not going to work. So technology only takes you so far, but this cultural element can make or break whether all this information and data that we're gathering and sharing and making and operationalizing and actually has any impact ultimately on those who I guess matter most, which are our patients.
It's true, our true north. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We have to move on to our next panel, but I think you framed it perfectly. And our next panel is going to talk about feedback with a lot of these data metrics. And so this is just step one is collecting it and then moving to the feedback mode. So thank you guys for investing in us, the surgeons, the patients. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Cara.
Thank you very much. Bye.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Thomas, Tamir, and Dan, for your insights. And Cara, thank you for guiding that panel. Thus far, the focus of the summit has been data and technology. As we turn to our final panel, there is something no algorithm can replace: the conversation a surgeon has after a difficult case, the courage to seek honest feedback, the trust that forms between coach and coachee. Coaching is fundamentally human, and historically, surgery has not always approached feedback in ways that fully honor that humanity. Our final panel, The Feedback Revolution: How Coaching Modernizes the Way Surgeons Teach and Learn, aims to change that mindset. The moderator for this panel is Dr. Christine Lombardozzi. Christine is the surgical director at the Academy for Surgical Coaching and the chair of surgery at Edward Via College of Osteopathic Medicine. She is board certified in general surgery and surgical critical care and is an ICF certified coach, giving her the clinical and professional expertise to lead this conversation. She is joined by Dr. Nima Shemarani, a double board certified facial, plastic, and head and neck surgeon with more than 8,000 procedures to his name and a passion for the intersection of surgical excellence and patient experience. And by Dr. Jane Lee, Director of Quality Improvement and Coaching in Otolaryngology and Neurotology at the University of British Columbia, a certified organizational coach and a board member of the Academy. And by Dr. Jacqueline Heilman, a general and colorectal surgeon at the Alaska Native Medical Center in Anchorage, Alaska. Christine, please take it away.
Thank you very much. And I'm very excited to have this group of surgeons with me to talk through coaching, feedback, and performance from the surgeon's perspective. And I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to lead off talking to Nima. You are a technically savvy, just detail-oriented surgeon. How did you come to the realization that you wanted to change your operative performance? Like, where did that feedback come from? How did you make that decision?
That's a good question. We do quarterly meetings in our business, and one of the sticking points was the length of time I was in surgery and the frustration I was feeling when I couldn't get the nose to look the way that I wanted. And I've had personal coaches, I've had business coaches, and during the meeting, I'm like, oh, I wonder if there are surgical coaches. So I found, the Academy for Surgical Coaching, and at first we're trying to find the right fit, right? They're like, oh, we don't have any rhinoplasty surgeons, but Christine has been my coach. And through the process we've been discussing, it has been very helpful for me to be more efficient. My surgeries still take a while, but I'm not staying like super late. I mean, I was staying till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night sometimes, just to make sure that a nose looked as perfect as possible when I was done. And now we've shortened that considerably. It still take a while, but much, I think, better results in a shorter amount of time.
When you started reviewing your performance and, really breaking it down, organizing your thought process and your technical skill, your cognitive, we talked through all 4 domains of performance. What was the hardest thing, and how did you manage the discomfort of looking at all of those domains?
Just trying to think. I'm very, unemotional when it comes to my own performance, right? So I think the things that were more enlightening were let's start dissecting which parts of the procedure lead to the most amount of difficulty. And I never really gone back and thought about each, like the individual steps or the parts of a rhinoplasty that I would focus on. And it kept coming back to the same thing. It's like, well, the nose being crooked is the hardest thing to make straight because most surgeons, almost every surgeon promises a straighter nose, but straighter to me means still crooked. And if we can find a way to make it crooked, make it straight, then that's where your I think metal as a rhinoplasty surgeon is judged unfairly. So the analogy I use in rhinoplasty surgery, it's like when people come in like, why does it take so long? I'm like, imagine you're assembling a piece of IKEA furniture and like 3/4 of the way you realize you put one panel the wrong way and you have to take everything apart and put it back together. And so I was just trying to minimize the backtracking during surgery. So taking a minute to assess, and then we've also discussed my wife actually comes and helps out during surgery because your eyes get a little tired from looking at the same thing for such a long time. So she's a little bit of a secret weapon that she comes in as a quality control before continuing on and building upon that foundation.
Yeah, your process through coaching and your process improvement has really been something amazing to be a part of and to witness. And you've seen, as you said, significant improvement in both your operative times and how you feel during your strategies and how you feel during your operation. For those who have not embarked on a coaching journey like yours, what reinforced you were on the right track? That, these small changes, what was it that signaled that like this is the way that I'm going to improve my performance?
I've just honestly never been disappointed in any of my coaches. I've always found value in it, and every single great person has some kind of coach or mentor, right? Especially athletes, LeBron, Kobe, even like Phil Jackson. I mean, I just got his book, 11 Rings, and people might say like, well, it's easy when you have superstars, but you have to manage egos and make sure that the team functions as a team. So, for those people who, if you can set your ego aside, which is really not that big of a deal, because in the end, you just want to have happier patients. You want to have happier, we were just discussing the operative team. When the surgeon is stressed out, everybody's on pins and needles, and it just makes for lots of more mistakes to happen because people are running on adrenaline and not, being calm with their decision-making skills. So it's almost like there's no one who wouldn't be a candidate for surgical coaching. I honestly believe that, if you can go through a few sessions and literally get nothing out of it, I just frankly don't believe you because to have another person to come and say, have you thought about doing it this way, or why do you think that process is? And, because it's hard to go back and just analyze your own OR cases from your perspective. It's nice to have a third party. Even if, Christine's my coach, she's a trauma surgeon, even though she's not a rhinoplasty surgeon, she's given me so much more information about just the first principles when it comes to surgery.
I, I appreciate this perspective. You really have that, as you said, your ego is not in this, and I think it shows what can be accomplished when we really sort of undertake the idea that everyone can be better. Thank you. We do have an interactive portion so that all of you that are here, we do have, if anyone's used Slido before, here would be, you have to go and scan I think the QR code if you would like to join us. In your own surgical practice, is there a place that you feel stuck? If you're thinking about your own practice, your own performance. Let's see if this works. It might take a minute for people to get. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I think this points as this is, I've plateaued and I don't know why, because it's not just one thing. I think understanding that we've got 4 quadrants that makes up our performance. And I do love that leading into our next session is on here the ability to give feedback and work with trainees, the ability to receive feedback ourselves. I think this is very representative of what I think we see when we coach surgeons. Can you flip to the next Slido question before I move on to Jacqueline? How would you describe your current feedback style with trainees? For those of us that are in, an environment with medical education, who's got a style? Right? A mix? directive. It depends a little bit on the learner that you're working with. Coaching, love it. And I like the honesty in the bottom row that what, for a lot of us, we don't think about how we work with our trainees. We sort of do what was done with us, and we haven't really taken the time. And so with that introduction, I think I'd love to shift to talking to Jacqueline. Um, you specifically undertook coaching with a directive to really um, understand how you wanted to be as a surgical educator. Can you talk to us a little bit about, once you adopted the coaching mindset, what changed? What changed about feedback? How was that received?
Yeah, honestly, thank you. Um, I was definitely on that last bar there where I honestly hadn't thought about it. Um, I'm very early in my career. I'm only in my second year as an attending, and um, I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm still just getting my feet under myself in terms of how I like to operate and how I need to run the room and all these things that, I had some experience and I thought I was pretty proactive in doing, as a trainee, but now I'm on the other side. And so for me, the biggest thing I think that surgical coaching with you has helped was really um, taking a step back, analyzing it, doing a lot of introspection, and just trying to figure out why I reacted the way that I did in the operating room and what do I want to do in terms of taking control of that, almost the narrative, taking control of how I come across to trainees and I remember you said this one time, what do you want your specific brand to be? And I really had never thought about that before. And that just having that, like I said, step back, what are, the things that I want to make sure that I get across to trainees really helped in terms of getting the process started.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a couple really good points early in the transition to being an attending. Like, this is not something that we teach in
No.
fellowship, in residency, and it's like it's magically we're supposed to know. And so I think these transitions are great times to sort of understand where some of these gaps are. How was it received? How did the people in your room respond as you made this change?
I will say I don't always have residents in my room, but I do feel that, even just talking about the case in general, I realized, everybody in the room is a learner, and even the staff in the room, the nurses, the techs, they and my first this and then they really appreciate understanding where my mind is during a case. And so I really started to, set the stage beforehand and say, make sure that everyone knew like this is going to be the really hard part of the case and it'd be really helpful to not have any, transitions of care like at that time if we can. I understand that's not possible all the time, but just really setting the stage beforehand. And then when I do have trainees there, one of the things that I found myself doing that did not come across well was when I hadn't thought about this ahead of time and had a trainee and I was doing a gallbladder with them and they started dissecting with, a suction irrigator, which has a very sharp tip, um, that I didn't even know how to verbalize the anxiety that I was feeling. And I honestly just held their hand and pulled it out of the patient, and so now when I have a gallbladder and I'm doing it with a trainee, I tell them ahead of time, you will not dissect with the suction irrigator. You're going to use a laparoscopic Kittner, which is much softer, and I set those expectations and I kind of have formed a mental list of these are my ground rules for the different procedures as I go through. And then I make sure I say that to the trainee since I don't know them beforehand. And that has dramatically made the experience so much better for me and for them. Because then they know what they should and should not be doing in my case. And then I can also, um, I mean, these are just like baby steps, but it dramatically changed a lot of things for me with the trainees.
That's, I'm hearing you've learned about yourself, what's important to you, where are your points of anxiety, and I love you're doing what Cara taught me. It's scaffolding. It's scaffolding expectations for everybody in the room. And again, not a skill that we're taught. And so, I appreciate, your appreciate the willingness to like undertake the coaching, and that this is a deliberate improvement that has absolutely nothing to do with your technical skills. It has everything to do with every other part. Um,
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And so I'm then going to, let's see, let's throw up. Actually, let's go. I'm going to move on, and we're going to have a little conversation with Jane. And so, Jane takes us one more step down this spectrum, an accomplished surgeon, and who has made the decision to be a coach and to be a surgical coach and a certified organizational coach. And I'd love for us to talk a little bit about what made you, what's worthwhile to you about taking that extra step.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Christine. I think, when you think about doing the credentialing and, becoming ICF certified, and it's a lot of work. So what makes you do that and what benefit has it brought to me? I think a lot of the things that have been said today is about going slow to go fast. And I think as a surgeon, that's something we kind of know, but we don't really practice in a conversation. And so for me, it really helped me realize that when I'm coaching or I'm teaching or training someone, that I need to take a step back and go slow to go fast and make sure I'm in the right mindset to do these things well. Also allow for silence. Also, it's really changed my approach in terms of that question you asked about whether you instruct or ask questions, or whether, it kind of changes your approach. For me, instead of telling people like how they did in that procedure, I would just ask them. And what a beautiful thing to do. How'd that go for you? And then letting them answer that has really changed how I approach things. It also makes my job easier because 99% of them have great insight, and then I don't have to say very much. I either have to confirm or add or maybe slightly revise, but it's really helped me take a step back. So it's changed, I think, also how I approach training. So if you think about setting expectations, it's been said multiple times, and Jacqueline just said that. So if I have a trainee the day before the OR, they're already telling me what their goals are for that procedure. What do they want to do? What part of the procedure? What do they want to leave with? What do they want to learn? Then I can confirm that before the procedure to make sure we're on the same page, especially if you have a medical student, resident, and a fellow in the room. You really have to manage expectations. So that's the first thing. But then also just not making that goal, but what do you do with it after? So you have to spend time with the debrief, asking them how it went, either confirm or revise that, and then figure out, well, what are you going to do differently next time? So it's really sort of changed how I approach everything. And I think the biggest benefit is I'm a better friend. I'm a better partner. I'm better in meetings. I show up differently. I actively listen now. I know when I'm not actively listening. And I think it's just changed who I am as a human. It's been a really hugely beneficial for personal, professional growth.
I
Sorry,
don't
that's
think
a long-winded answer.
I don't think I could have said that better, and I think I identify with a lot of what you said about how this resonates with me. Dovetailing in on that, do you think that coaching should be embedded into surgical education? That this shouldn't be just something that we choose to bring, but we should bring for all trainees?
I do. I think it's a gentler approach that's more effective. Also, if you emulate that, so if you see Nima and you see Jacqueline, they're willing to be vulnerable. And I think if you show that vulnerability by at the end of the case or during the case, say, you know what, I didn't do that well, I should have done X, or asking someone else what I could have done, asking the anesthesiologist, asking the nurse what could have made it better for them. I think that is something that changes the whole dynamic in the OR. But bringing in coaching, I think it allows people to leave training with the tools they need to continue to improve. If they're not reflecting and you don't encourage the reflection, you're always telling and always doing the work for them, I think they leave with less agency. So I think coaching helps people have agency to improve longer when they're in practice and much later.
And you bring up a great theme of psychological safety in the room, in ourselves. And was that a challenge for the three of you? Was that a challenge to create that psychological safety for yourself, your trainees, and your colleagues?
I mean, I can go. I think in our practice, the patient comes number one, all egos aside. One of our core values, or the two, committed to the best outcome and striving to improve. And coaching, I think, just fits really nicely with that. There's no culture that's like very malignant. Even if things get tense, I'll tell a couple of jokes to apologize for my snappy behavior, just to make the room a little bit more calm. Because you are kind of like the conductor of the entire orchestra inside the operating room, and your mood affects everybody else's for sure. So, but no, I mean, it'd be arrogant to think that you know everything and there's no best surgeon in the world, right? Just
Wonderful.
like the top
Jacqueline?
echelon. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, I get to have you as a coach because you have so much more experience. And then I think in terms of psychological safety in the operating room, I am still trying to get that, right? Like
Mm.
as a new female attending, don't feel psychologically safe in the OR myself. And that's just because there's just so many expectations and there is so much sexism, whether or not we all want it to be there or not. And so I'm already, on edge often. Thankfully, there's a core group of a team that has been so supportive, and I don't feel that with. But it's you don't always get your core team, and so I do find that it is sometimes difficult for me to then create that space for a trainee when I don't have it myself. But it's definitely something that I strive for, and I always am going back to like, okay, you as a trainee did not get that. Um, so how can we try to change that for this next generation and also working through the big differences between, East Coast trainee where I was, and then now I'm out on the West Coast. It's very different. Um, so yeah, I would say definitely something I'm striving for, but definitely not there. Both in myself and what I deal with, but then also what I try to bring. I humbly say that I'm still very much working on that.
But aren't we all? I think all of us can relate to that and have been in that situation and are in that situation on a day to day, no matter what our level of experience is. It's just the nuances change. And so I really appreciate this really robust and honest discussion about coaching, the benefits of getting your own feedback, of how we choose to give feedback, and then, how are we creating the training environment for the people that are coming behind us. And so thank you all. I'm hoping that you serve as a great example for those people here with us today that would like to take that next step, that you've really shown, what can be accomplished by sort of taking on your own performance and your own feedback. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
That was a great discussion. Thank you, Nima, Jacqueline, Jane, and Christine. So from Dr. Pugh's extraordinary keynote to the conversations that followed about data, AI, human intelligence, feedback, and the future of how we teach and learn in surgery. This type of event does not happen without a lot of belief and support. So before we wrap up, I'd like to say thank you one more time to Vitvio Theater and Caveris. Your partnership with the Academy makes events like this possible. Your investment in this community is an investment in every patient who will benefit from a better prepared surgeon. We are grateful to each of you. To our speakers and panelists, thank you for generously sharing your time and expertise. And lastly, thank you to each of you who has joined us today, whether you are a trained academy coach, a surgeon exploring what coaching could mean for your practice, or someone for whom surgical coaching resonates. If you like what you heard today, if you want to be involved, here's how to stay connected and keep the momentum going. Please subscribe to our Mastery in Motion podcast. You can find us again on Spotify, YouTube, or on our homepage at surgicalcoaching.org. Follow the Academy on LinkedIn, where we share program updates, coach spotlights, and everything happening across our community. You'll receive a link to today's recording once we have it posted. Please share it widely. These conversations deserve, a much larger audience. If today sparked something in you, if you found yourself thinking about what it would mean to become a trained surgical coach, if you're interested in bringing surgical coaching to your institution or practice, or if you want to learn more about partnering with us, please visit our website to explore all of our offerings. On behalf of the entire Academy for Surgical Coaching team, thank you for attending the 2026 Summit. We look forward to collaborating with each of you. Have a good evening.
Thank you guys. Thanks for being here. And huge thanks to Audrey and Pearl who made this happen. Thank you guys so much.